John Horgan. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for you to coming on. And so there's this book that you read, that you wrote actually, "The End of War," and I kind of wanted to talk to you about war. And
Okay.
so, okay, so as you've heard, we might be getting into war, and I don't know what will happen by the time that I actually publish this, but uh, take it from the top. Okay, so it, it's very interesting that you say that war is not something that is innate to human beings, right? That it's not in our nature to go to war. But what do you really mean by that? Because from everything that I've seen, it's kind of like the opposite.
Yeah. Most people feel that way. All right. So let me just tell you, give you a little bit of my background. I'm a child of the 60s. I am so old that I could have been drafted to go into the Vietnam War. I had a draft card when I was in high school. And I graduated in 1971, and the Vietnam War was still happening. And it was possible that I could have gotten um, a low lottery number. This is when there was a lottery to determine who went,
Right.
and had to go to Vietnam. So I grew up. My point is that I grew up thinking about war a lot. I
Yeah.
also grew up when the Cold War was really bad and there was a constant threat of nuclear weapons. Um, a nuclear war between the US and Russia that could annihilate all life on Earth. So this all seemed crazy to me. That the concept of war, people slaughtering each other in large numbers, seemed not just wrong, but really stupid. And I've
Hmm.
never lost that feeling that war is really stupid. And then
Yeah.
I became a science writer in the 1980s and started writing about lots of topics about science and philosophy, but also about war and what we know about how war started, when humans started fighting wars, why we fight, all the different kinds of fighting that there are. And I gradually developed this thesis that war is not something that's in our genes. A lot of people think it is, but war is a relatively recent human invention. It really only broke out, maybe 8 to 10,000 years ago, especially in the Middle East,
Hmm.
which seems appropriate since there's so much war there still. And I wrote this book, The End of War, really to convince people that war isn't something that we have no control over. It's
Hmm.
not this behavior that's coded into our genes that we just can't escape.
Hmm.
It's something that we choose to do,
Right.
that we can choose not to do anymore. I admit that's a hard sell right now. Talking about the end of war just makes most people think you're nuts. But I'm more convinced than ever that it's possible and it's something that we absolutely have to do to save our species.
So when you talk about ending war, that has to be more of a an option that humans need to exercise, right? It's not
Yeah.
something that's going to be naturally causing. So Steven Pinker kind of like talks about the opposite of that as well.
Yeah, Pinker is somebody who's very relevant to this discussion. Pinker wrote a book called Better Angels of Our Nature, in which he talked about this long decline of violence and cruelty in human history. So he's actually pretty sympathetic toward the idea of war, even though he does think that war is in our biology, it's in our nature somehow. But when he wrote Better Angels, he was optimistic that that at least we could greatly reduce the degree of warfare and violence that we engage in. And as far as what do we do to replace war, we've already got all these institutions
Hmm.
that are designed to get us talking to each other, to help us reach uh, resolutions where we avoid warfare. That's what the UN was designed
Hmm.
for. That's what international treaties are for. Uh, and even if you look at our legal systems in this country, those are designed to help individuals and institutions avoid conflict. So you
Right.
can have one state, New Jersey, I live in New Jersey, might have a conflict with New York State and over, I don't know, water distribution or something or
Yeah.
pollution. They don't go to war over that. They don't bomb each other. They go to court and
Hmm.
try to figure it out through the legal system, which isn't perfect, but at least it keeps us from killing each other in large numbers. So I think we just need to apply some of the inventions that we already have for avoiding violence and resolving conflicts nonviolently.
And okay, so let me paint a better picture. We have different countries, and for the most part, we operate the same way. We respect other countries' sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
Every country has a political system. We respect that. So when it comes to war, there could be a framework, and this is kind of like the argument that you make, right? There could be a framework that everyone respects, just like we respect every country's sovereignty. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yes. I mean, again, this is what the United Nations was designed to do. The problem is the United Nations is quite weak, and a lot of countries just ignore it. And if they want to go to war, they go to war. The United States has done this repeatedly. Russia just did it when it invaded Ukraine. Um, so the
Yeah.
United Nations is really just kind of uh, it's supposed to be a moral force
Hmm.
that tells us what it thinks is right and wrong and tries to discourage nations from going to war with each other, but it doesn't have any legal force behind it.
Hmm.
So we keep going to war. And
Hmm.
the problem is when war breaks out, it tends to be self perpetuating.
Right.
So when Russia invades Ukraine or the US invades Afghanistan or Iraq and now Venezuela, other
Yeah.
countries go, well, look, if the United States is doing this, why can't we do it?
Hmm.
And so that perpetuates this idea that war is okay in some circumstances. One of the things that I try to do with my writing, I write about war all the
Hmm.
time. I mean, I have this book, The End of War, that's about 15 years old now. But I also have a website. I constantly am writing about the wars in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, um, and I try to get people just to see war as crazy,
Yeah.
as this really grotesque, primitive behavior. We're supposed to be civilized, and the U.S., um, which in some ways is the greatest country ever in human history, routinely goes to war and bombs children. It
Hmm.
bombs old people, totally innocent people. How can that be? How can we call ourselves civilized when we engage in behavior like that? So I'm trying to get people to see just to see war as this terrible, terrible behavior that should be totally obsolete. It's going to be difficult to get rid of it. It's deeply embedded in our culture,
Hmm.
but I'm hoping that we can become aware of it in this way and figure out ways to get beyond it once and for all.
I mean, especially American culture, because we have this sense of being patriotic and supporting the military, but at the same time, we're subconsciously supporting a war machine that causes people to lose their lives and invading other countries and such.
Yeah, I mean, so another reason to get rid of war is just because we spend so much money on it and we
Hmm.
devote so much of our resources to it, and there's so many people whose lives are dedicated to thinking about how to kill others or how to intimidate others and force them
Hmm.
to do things they don't want to do. A lot of our scientists and engineers are designing better weapons. Now, right now, artificial intelligence, a
Hmm.
big source of funding for artificial intelligence is the military. There's an arms race in artificial intelligence between China, Russia, the US, and other countries. We spend about $1 trillion a year, the US, on the military.
Hmm.
That's money that can be spent on schools, on transportation, on better sources of energy to clean up the environment, on healthcare. So there are so many different reasons to get rid of war. And the
Yeah.
problem is right now, people aren't even having that conversation. And
Yeah.
that's what really worries me.
So you hit on another important point, and that is that we spend about $1 trillion on war. Yeah, so we spend that, and you make the case that that is a waste of money, but also $1 trillion. Someone's making money off of war, and as long as there's people making money and profiting off war, we're going to continue having wars.
That's a huge problem. Um, the flip side of that argument, I mean, some people say you're not going to get rid of war as long as you have capitalism. And
Yeah.
even communist China is capitalism now. There are people who have always profited off warfare in various ways. Uh, but I think the big capitalists,
Yeah.
the tech companies now are trying to get a piece of military spending. They are getting a piece of it. But war is bad for business.
Hmm.
War disrupts international trade and commerce, and it makes life unpredictable. So I think the capitalists recognize this and that they will make more money if there is no war.
Hmm.
That's my hope, and I absolutely believe that that's true. War is a very inefficient way of making money. It has a lot of side effects, including people getting killed,
Hmm.
and all this money and energy being diverted into killing and blowing things up and destroying property and people. So I'm hoping that even the capitalists who are profiting off war will recognize that the world will be a better place and more profitable if they
Hmm.
can get past war once and for all.
Yeah, but as long as we have a financial incentive, and I mean, we as in the U.S. and probably even uh, global, like the global economy, as long as there's a financial incentive, I don't see war going away. So maybe war is not human nature, but greed maybe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is, I think a lot of people will agree with you, even if it's not in our genes.
Hmm.
It's just a byproduct of human greed, and humans are very competitive and aggressive. Um, all I can do is try to convince people that a world without war
Hmm.
would be a much better world than the one we live in now. That's a hard sell right now.
Oh yeah.
I don't get many people who think, I teach a class based on my book, The End of War,
Hmm.
at my university, which is right up the street from me
Right.
here, and my students mostly think it's a total pipe dream, that the
Mm.
idea that war will end someday. But I just keep trying to convince them. They all agree that the world would be better without war,
Yeah.
but they just say, there's too many powerful forces behind war. We can never change. I think things could change. Even Donald Trump
Hmm.
has paid lip service to the idea that peace is good and is stupid. It's a waste of money
Right.
and resources. The problem is he's extremely prone to violence, and he just invaded Venezuela. Now he's talking about invading Iran.
Hmm.
So he didn't really discourage Israel from its military operations in Gaza. So Trump isn't the guy who's going to start the
Yeah.
conversation about how to end war, but I think somebody else could. I
Right.
think I think it's a big issue, just waiting for a smart politician to come along and get people excited about it and start a global conversation about
Hmm.
how to end war.
So, okay, so let me paint another picture. There
Okay.
was a murder case that I came across. So you have it basically a love triangle, if you even want to call it that. But so there was a husband. The husband had a mistress, and he wanted his wife dead, right? So he was thinking about a reason to have his wife killed, and he could look like the hero. So he goes on this fetish website, right? And I hope that you know where I'm getting with this. So he goes on a fetish website and pretends to be his wife, and letting this other person know, like, break into the house. This is the scene that I want to play out. So this individual does as he's told. He breaks into this house, pretending that, or thinking that who he's speaking with is the man's wife, and barges in. Husband comes out, shoots the guy. The wife ends up stabbed, I think, and then he tells the cops that he fabricates this story that he breaks in, he shoots, he shoots him, and then the wife is stabbed to death, and it all looks like this thing that it was a staged break-in, so he could then go and be with this other woman.
Right.
Do you think that at a mass scale, countries do that? They stage a an event, so they have a motive to go to war with that country. And you think that's kind of what happened with Gaza?
Um, you mean that that the initial invasion by Hamas was somehow staged by Israel? No, if that's what you're suggesting, I I don't think that's what happened. I
Mm-hmm.
think that Hamas actually planned that attack,
Mm-hmm.
and it just didn't anticipate. I hope it didn't anticipate how brutally Israel would retaliate. But
Mm-hmm.
what you just said does apply to a famous incident that led to the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin incident,
Mm-hmm.
where there was an American destroyer, I think it was, that claimed that the Vietnamese had attacked it with torpedoes. And then that was the justification for us to start fighting against the North Vietnamese. And it led to this gigantic war. And it turned out that that was a lie. We just
Mm-hmm.
lied.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that happens all the time. I don't think it happened with Gaza, but it
Mm-hmm.
happens all the time.
But it does happen.
Yeah, it totally happens. And I guess I'm saying that I think in the future, I'm hoping that people will just realize that violence is stupid. I think violence is still going to happen on an
Mm-hmm.
individual level. I think you're still going to have men and women fighting, and men fighting each other, women fighting each other. And sometimes that will get violent and people will get killed. But governments are supposed to be rational. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping that governments can move past this kind of situation that you're talking about, where they
Mm-hmm.
use deceit and violence to get their way. But right now, the world is moving in the opposite direction. It's looking
Mm-hmm.
more and more irrational and crazy. Um, but I'm still going to preach my message of peace.
Yeah. But it's an interesting subject because war is going to happen as long as there's a financial incentive, as I've said, and we don't really see that going away. Now, AI may change things, but how it changes, we don't know. I don't know if it may be a technological advantage that other countries will have, because there is an arms race even when it comes down to AI and what country could produce AI faster and better. But it's also a threat. So now when it comes to like human lives, and people being killed. I don't know if AI may change that, that we may go into this cyber warfare, or we may produce weapons with AI to kill targets at a more accurate rate. What do you?
Sure, that's already happening. AI is already um, a part of, for example, the war in Ukraine.
Mhm,
Uh, the Israeli government uses AI for a lot of security, military related purposes. This is happening already. We're already moving toward a situation where there are um, drones, for example, that
mhm,
have AI built into them that can identify targets and kill them on their own
mhm,
autonomously. That's already happened. Now, there are some people who say, well, maybe in the future it'll just be robots fighting robots and no humans will be killed. No, that's not the way war works. Once war breaks out, you
mhm,
want to hurt the other side and
mhm,
make them surrender. So at some point, you're going to be killing people and blowing up buildings that people live in and that supply electricity and water and things like that.
mhm,
So we just have to get rid of all this behavior.
mhm,
AI wouldn't be so bad. It wouldn't be so scary to me if it was just being applied to solve problems.
mhm.
Problems like climate change, like curing cancer, or coming up with better treatments for mental illness. But right now, so much of AI is going into figuring out how to win a war with China. Uh, and that is terrifying to
Right.
me. It's got to be stopped somehow.
Yeah. But that's wanting to solve problems, and we know that our government is not very interested in wanting to solve problems.
Yeah, it looks that way right now. And Donald Trump is very tight with the tech billionaires
Hmm.
right now. And Trump has said he doesn't want any regulation of AI at all. So it's
Yeah.
full steam ahead, producing AI that can have lots of bad effects. And there's no regulation or oversight of that at all.
And that's also scary because we know that Congress, especially, they move really slowly. So by the time that they come to a conclusion of like what to do with AI, it's already going to be too late.
Well, I think Congress at this point has pretty much abdicated its responsibility. It's not even, at least the Republicans are not even trying to restrain
Hmm.
Trump or the billionaires, whether we get a new president someday or a different Congress, and they actually uh, fulfill their responsibility to the people
Hmm.
to reduce these threats. I mean, I hope that happens. Right now, things look pretty dark, I must admit.
So, do you actually believe that war could end? Or, because you make the argument that war has the ability to end. But now, do you believe that we will ever come to a point that war does end? And, you have countries that just have like handshake agreements.
I do. The reason I believe that is because I think you've already got examples throughout the world where countries, regions that used to be really aggressive and violent toward each other are peaceful now. And it's inconceivable that there would be war. You just look at France and Germany.
Hmm.
Um, for, I don't know, more than 1,000 years, those two
Hmm.
regions were were viciously fighting against each other. Throw England in the mix too.
Hmm.
These major European powers beating the hell out of each other for many, many centuries. And World War II finally made them realize this is crazy. We're just
Hmm.
destroying ourselves in this way. And now I think it's fair to say it's inconceivable you would have war between U.S., France, and Britain. So we just have to create a world where that extends across the globe, where all countries realize how stupid war is. They realize that there have to be these nonviolent ways of resolving disputes.
Hmm.
Um, doesn't really look like we're headed in that direction right now, I admit.
Hmm.
Um, but I still think it's conceivable because I see demonstration proofs out there in the world right now.
Because war is fairly a new concept, right? You talk about it really was brought about, say, 10,000 years ago, and then but I think after the Industrial Revolution we saw an increase in war, and I think especially after World War II and how economic prosperous war was, when people realized that, you know what, we could probably make a lot of money with war.
Well, since World War II, so the first half of the 20th century was extraordinarily bloody. It depends on how you count war casualties, but some estimates that I've seen say about 200 million people were killed in World War II.
Hmm.
So this enormous bloodshed since World War II. This is what Steven Pinker, who you mentioned earlier, has
Hmm.
talked. The casualties from war have gone way down. We haven't had any war comparable to World War II, fortunately. Now, the threat of war is still there,
Yeah.
and we have these gigantic nuclear arsenals that could kill millions of people in an instant. But at least until recently, it looked like we're entering a period when you could talk about the end of war, when it looked like major countries around the world weren't interested in going to war with each other anymore. Now, in part because of the aggression of the US and Russia, not so much China. China doesn't look interested in war. Um, the threat of war has grown again. There's a nuclear arms race that's just beginning
Hmm.
again between the US, China, and Russia. So that really concerns me. It's just all the more reason for people to get behind this idea that
Hmm.
war can end. It has to end.
Yeah. So even though it may appear, because I want to say it's Steven Pinker who had this argument that he, he makes the argument that violence is decreasing, right?
Yes.
And although it may look like the world might be more violent, that's because we're more tuned into what's happening in the world.
Yes.
But the trend at which violence is being caused is at a lower trend. So we might be seeing that at a global scale as well.
Yeah. I think that's the hope. But Pinker's book came out, as did my book, The End of War,
Hmm.
when Obama was still president. And it was also right before the war broke out in Syria.
Uh-huh.
And Syria sent things in the other direction. There were hundreds of thousands of casualties that emerged in Syria. The casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan have also gone up. So that decline in war deaths that Pinker talked about has been reversed lately, and you're getting a lot more people dying. The war in Ukraine has been extraordinarily bloody,
Hmm.
um, and also just international tensions have
Hmm.
increased. So you need some leadership, political
Yeah.
leadership, to say this has got to stop. This is getting dangerous. It looks like we're headed possibly toward another world war that could even be a nuclear war. This is insane. We've got to stop it.
Hmm.
It won't be easy. We have to do it as part of this global dialogue with a lot of different countries involved. But I think it's possible, especially if there's a grassroots movement of people who just demand
Hmm.
that our leaders figure out how to end war.
Uh, I mean, that's interesting for sure. And even though we might be seeing that there is an increase in violence when it comes to war, it may be because trends don't happen like at a perfect slope. So it's always going to go down, it's always going to go up, and so forth. So that may actually be what's happening. That we're seeing a increase in war, but at the same time, it's at a decrease overall.
Yes, that's my hope. Um, I try to be optimistic always. I'm a teacher. I'm a
Mhm.
father. I have two children. Uh, and I have to believe in the future. I have to believe that the future will be better than the present. Um, and but right now, and so I'm still optimistic now,
Yeah.
but it's not easy.
Mhm.
Uh, as I said, most people are skeptical. If you talk about the end of war, most people look at you like, "What have you been smoking? You're crazy. You're just an old hippie." And I am an old hippie.
Mhm.
But part of being a hippie for me meant seeing war as this terrible behavior that we have to get past, like slavery, like
Yeah.
the subjugation of women. We've gotten over some of these really terrible behaviors that we had in the past that were just commonly accepted. We have to do that with war as well. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I also had a conversation with Matt Ridley, who wrote a book called The Rational Optimist. That,
Yeah.
yeah, that even though it may seem that there may be a lot of violence and things may be bad currently, it's nowhere near what we experienced, say, 100 years ago, maybe even
Yeah.
200 years ago. That times are better than they were now. And it's just that we're also living in a news cycle that's just 24/7, that we're just being bombarded with bad news all the time, that it comes to a point that it's just exhausting of how much bad stuff is happening in the world. Because
Yeah. Yeah. Ridley is, he's kind of in the Steven Pinker camp. The thing
mhm,
about those guys, though, is that in some ways, I think they're a little bit too blasé
mhm,
when it comes to thinking that everything is going to be okay.
mhm,
Both of them are very much, I think this is fair to say, behind capitalism as it exists right now. Both of them say things. So, Steven Pinker, one of his biggest fans is Bill Gates of Microsoft. If the
yeah,
billionaires think that you're really great, that worries me a little bit. That means that maybe your message is a little bit too comforting to the rich and powerful and not taking into account the poor people, the poor and oppressed.
mhm,
So I think we're stuck with capitalism, but I think capitalism needs a lot more oversight and regulation from governments than I'm guessing Pinker or Ridley would say.
yeah. So, what other system do you think that we could put in place?
I think it's just we've already got the ideas. Again, it's
Mhm,
just capitalism that is regulated. So,
mhm,
just one obvious example where I think the free market doesn't really work is healthcare.
mhm,
American healthcare is a mess. It's extremely expensive. It's bankrupting us. We spend more per capita by far than any other country in the world, but our healthcare outcomes, our overall health and longevity, are way down there with
mhm,
third world countries that are spending a fraction of what we spend. And that's because I think medicine and capitalism don't go well together. I think
mhm,
our healthcare system has to be socialized.
mhm,
That's what most European countries
mhm.
already have in place. They've got their own problems with
Right.
their health systems, but all of those systems deliver much better health at much less cost.
Yeah.
That's what I think we should be copying.
Right. And there's also this thing that people just like labeling things and labeling systems as capitalistic, communist, like having a communist country or socialism or, like all of these different labels. But maybe creating a system that we don't necessarily label as this is what we're going to have, but seeing what does work uh, with all of these systems, even communism. Like we know that communism doesn't work, but are there, even if it's just 1% of what they do, like, is there anything that they do better than what we do, and just create a system that does it better, even if we share some like some things from a communist society, even though that may see sounds really radical, but
Right. I agree. We're at a point in American politics where anything that requires government spending to help people, like in healthcare, or welfare, or even overseeing the environment and making sure that companies don't pollute, is seen as communist. It's
yeah.
stupid. That those labels are distracting. We should just look at what works and what doesn't work. We should decide what kind of country we want to live in, and then try to come up with some kind of blend of different practices, whether you want to call it capitalism or socialism or whatever, that works, and get past these stupid political labels and debates. For me, it comes down to data. I'm looking at the United States healthcare system. I've written about this a lot. And as I said, we spend a lot and we get really crappy outcomes.
Right.
So, if you're just a consumer, it's like you get a cell phone. Your cell phone costs $5,000 and it doesn't work as well as a cell phone that costs $1,000. You got a bad deal. Well, Americans have a bad deal when it comes to healthcare. And so we should do something about that.
Yeah. And, another thing that I want to touch on is that with Mondani winning in New York, people said that he was just going to burn New York to the ground. And I've had conversations with people, and I've told them, like, we said the same thing about Donald Trump, but we gave him a chance to see what he could do. But even when it comes to having like a socialist candidate, we just want to push them to the side and say that their ideas are never going to work. But we say that about so many different politicians, that their ideas will never work. But the best thing to really figure out is having them elected and see what they're able to do, because sometimes they may do things that may be bad. They may do some things that may be good, but we could learn from what works, because what we know is that our current system that we have in place, for the most part, is not working for the average American.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mandani. He, by the way, Eric, I have to go pretty soon, so this will, I guess, be something that we could wrap up with.
Yeah.
I'm pessimistic. I've told you I'm a little worried about my country and the world, but I live in New Jersey. New York City is right across the river, Hudson River, from me. The most exciting thing that's happened, the most hopeful thing that's happened over the last few years is the election of Mandani. He had billionaires trying to ruin him and swearing that they would never let him be elected, but he was elected. That's democracy in action. Poor people who wanted it, not poor people, but just people weren't rich, not Wall Streeters, but others, common New Yorkers, voted for this guy because they liked things that he was saying. Will he fulfill all his campaign promises? We'll see. New York City is a tough place, but let's give him a chance. And he is getting a chance now.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with what you say. This is the nature of democracy. It's always an experiment, and we're try different candidates, we try different policies and see what works and doesn't work.
Yeah. And
things get better.
So before you go, where can people read more about your work?
I have a website. I've got a couple of books posted for free there, and I've got a lot of columns. It's johnhorgan.org. Very easy to find.
Great. Well, I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we're able to have many more in the future.
Me too.
All right. Well, you have a good one.
Okay, you too.